Welcome to the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Here we provide tips, tools, and resources to help law enforcement officers succeed at work and in life. I'm your host, Michael McIntosh, retired sheriff and current bureau chief in the Denver metro area. It's not uncommon for law enforcement officers to build a successful career while their life at home suffers. There are countless reasons why finding a healthy work-life balance is so difficult. Today I have the privilege of talking with Derek and Alicia Dummar. They share what's helped keep their marriage strong and fulfilling, even through challenges like shift work, bringing work mentalities home, and dealing with public scrutiny. Derek is a patrol sergeant with an 18-year career in law enforcement in the Denver metro area. He and Alicia have been married for 19 years, raised 2 boys, and have navigated the highs and lows of family life for first responders. Well, this morning we get to talk with Derek and Alicia, and one of the things that I think is really important for law enforcement is to make sure that we're very balanced and very well-rounded. And part of that is, we spend so much time in a law enforcement organization preparing our deputies and our officers for the things that they're going to encounter, and we should. That's the right thing to do. But it hasn't been until recently that we really have started thinking about how it is that we prepare not just the law enforcement officer, but the family itself for all of the things that a law enforcement officer is going to go through during their career. And one of the things that I really appreciate about what you two have done is you will go into an academy and really start to prepare a cadet that's going to be an officer or a deputy from the very beginning about some of the things that they need to be aware of, some of the obstacles that they're going to face, but also really give them hope and encouragement that even though our profession seems to have a high divorce rate, and it can be tough on families, you can be successful, but you're not going to be successful if you're not intentional, if you're not focused on it. So first, just kind of tell our listeners how you came about to doing that, and then obviously a little bit about yourselves and how long you've been together and how you've navigated through this thing that we call life in the law enforcement world.
Well, we've been married going on 19 years.
19, yeah.
19 this month, actually, July. We started kind of on a fluke. I was an FTO in the patrol division, and I had made a comment to my commander at the FTO program at the time that my wife really didn't like public speaking. So on a kind of family night from a jail to patrol orientation, they called her up to say a piece, and that's really kind of how the whole thing started. It was kind of meant as a joke, and everyone kind of seemed really receptive to what we had to say, and it just kind of grew from there. And it's kind of something that we've done every family night in the patrol division while I was there, and then when I transferred to the academy as a coordinator, we continued to do it there on the family.
That's great. So not so much funny for you,
Yeah,
when you got called up to the room the first time.
definitely out of my comfort zone for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you recall when you spoke that first time? Do you recall kind of what you told and that was big for us, talking from a jail to patrol perspective, to really kind of prepare again family members for a change in job role and responsibility, and that it's totally different. Still a deputy, still have a lot of the same roles and responsibilities from a certified perspective, but a completely different job.
At the time for the FTO position, I just kind of focused more on, self-care from a spouse's point. They're going to be very busy. They're going to get they're going to have late hours. They're going to be stuck late. So you have to be flexible and understanding. Just know if there's a function, you're probably going to have to go by yourself occasionally. And also for the self-care portion, just, they're not going to be home for a lot of the time. You need to make sure you have your own hobbies, your own interests, your own, like friend group to rely on. And I kind of focused on reaching out to other law enforcement spouses. I had a very good support system in my family, and initially I didn't realize how important having a support group that is in the law enforcement family, how important that was.
So, Derek, how did that kind of light bulb moment go on for you, and where were you in your career when you started to realize, hey, I need to start being intentional about making sure that my family's taken care of, and maybe not always going to choir practice or to the family or the shift barbecue? Or how did you realize what was that defining moment that you realized that I need to do something a little bit different? And then how did you navigate that?
For me, it was kind of it almost kind of took it did take like a rock bottom. I was involved so much it's stuff in when I was in the jail division, and when I went to patrol, I said I'm not going to be an FTO, and I want to cut back my time as a firearms instructor, and I wanted to try to make more time. But then I got into the patrol division, and it was always something like I think I felt I had to do. I don't think anybody put it on me per se, but when your group of guys at the end of a shift are going to all go have a beer, or they're going to hang out with each other, that's a hard thing to walk away from, because you just spent 10 hours with these guys or 40 hours with these guys in that work week where you've been involved in crazy situations, and that bond that's formed with those people is so tight that it's really hard to say no to that. And I was not good at it at all.
Or good at saying no.
I was not. No. And I was not good at putting my family first. I was, unfortunately, they kind of caught a brunt of it. And I think it was from all aspects, right? The frustrations that I was having on the job, I would take home. And when I was with the guys that I worked with, it was laughs and it was jokes, and I was happy, normal, smiling Derek. But at home, I wasn't that person. And, I just hit like a rock bottom and almost ended my marriage. I realized at that moment that I wasn't the person that I wanted to be, and that the people that I loved the most, the people that I should be taking care of, I wasn't doing a very good job of.
Do you recall how far into your career you were at that point? Was that 5-7 years?
I was probably 6 years into my career as a deputy, and probably 3 years into my patrol career, 3.5 years. And I feel like it really kind of went downhill for me in the patrol setting. The jail setting was, when I was part of that division, I mean, I don't feel like that took the time away from what was important, like patrol did.
Yeah. Well, Eddie, when you're in a jail setting, you work with a team, but you do a lot of individual or just with one partner. When you're in charge of a module or an area, but on patrol, there's that team becomes very, very tight knit. And I can tell you, I got caught up in the exact same thing, and it literally, Kathy had said, we're done here. We had separated for about a month, and that's when I kind of realized I need to start doing things differently. I need to rearrange my priorities. We just celebrated our 36th anniversary. So
that's awesome.
It can, it takes work. And I think the whole purpose of you guys telling your story and being in front of those cadets is hopefully they're not making some of those same mistakes, and they catch it sooner, because law enforcement is going to change us as individuals, but we need to take our partner along with us as we walk down that road. and they have to be as much of that transition as we are. They've got to be present. So what did you start to do that started to change that course in that direction?
I think the biggest thing was just taking her with me on the journey, as opposed to her just maybe, I don't know how I would word it. Previously I was always trying to protect her. I was always trying to not talk to her about things. When you're talking to people who haven't been through some of the stuff that you've been through, it's hard to feel like they can relate or that they can understand what you're saying. And I never really tried to communicate that before, because it was the assumption that she's just not going to understand. And if I did give her a tidbit of something and I didn't get the response I was looking for, then I just automatically in my mind made up, she doesn't get it. And at the change, it became, she was my partner in this. She was kind of riding shotgun with me. I would come home and talk to her about the things that I was going through. I found ways for me to alleviate some of the stress and the anxiety that was coming along with the job, right? I seek counseling. We went to marriage counseling. We really tried to do things to bring us closer instead of having the job be the thing that divided us apart. And I was very fortunate to have a wife who was willing to take the journey with me, right? She could have very easily threw up the middle finger, walked away, and would have been completely right in doing so with the way things were. And she chose to stick it out with me and kind of come with me on this. So it's been a big kudos to her for actually staying with me to figure it out.
So what did you see from your perspective? Were you guys married when you started in law enforcement or shortly thereafter?
Not married when I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was going to give me trouble. We were married, but we got married prior to me being in law enforcement.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So she knew, and we were high school sweethearts.
Okay.
So the Derek that was and the Derek that is from law enforcement are two completely different people, which it's probably been, I guess, one of the biggest adjustments.
Yeah. Like you said, it will change you. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing was just, communication. It's huge. And so, like he said, just including me in things, talking to me about things a little bit more. If not his exact experiences, just maybe trying to communicate how he's feeling about things. And I think for me as well, too. And just sometimes you have to relearn how to do that also. If, like he said, he's not the same person. So we were always very good at communicating. And then when he became a police officer, went to patrol and all these things changed, we kind of had to refigure that out, how to communicate with each other.
Which can be difficult, especially when you're sleeping when she's awake and you're sleeping when he's awake and at work. And at times you're two ships passing in the night. You're at home trying to raise the boys, take care of the house. He leaves for swing shift, gets up in the morning, does what he needs to do, leaves for swing shift and walks through the door at 3 or 4 o'clock the next morning. So that's something that will change that family dynamic and really is difficult to navigate, but it can be done. So when you guys go in front of the cadets and talk about what they need to do or what they need to consider as they move forward, explain kind of what you do and some of the tips that you give them from the very beginning.
From the very beginning, especially as a husband, I think a lot of my problem was I was the protector, right? So I was trying to keep her safe from what I perceived were going to be things that were going to be bad for her. So first and foremost, I try to convey to the cadets and anybody who will listen that your significant other is an adult and they can tell you when something is too much or not. And if they're not telling you that this is too much or that they need you to maybe back off or keep a story for another week or whatever the case is, you need to not worry about so much trying to protect them, but give them that information and then let them decide when they need to protect themselves and when they don't. And that's kind of been probably one of the biggest things. I spent so much time trying to protect her and my kids when really, like I said, she should have been part of that process, because that's what a marriage is, right? It's the highs and the lows, it's the good times and it's the bad times, and it's being there to help each other in those bad times. And when you're fighting a fight by yourself, you kind of put yourself in a position where you feel like you're the only one in the room and nobody else gets you or cares. And that's a dangerous place for an officer to put themselves, right? So my biggest thing, I guess, I try to convey is just being the partner and having that communication and she's a very smart woman. She can decide when enough is enough and when she doesn't want to hear anymore.
Yeah, and I think I appreciate kind of the way the narrative changed from when we would speak from jail to patrol, and then the things that he covers now in the academy are more that. Whereas prior it was like, you're gonna have to be understanding, they're gonna be under a lot of pressure, you're gonna have to, just be flexible and really just they drove that home more than, it is a teamwork, and it's not just him doing this and you got to stay home and be understanding. It's you can kind of watch for these signs also and call them on their bullshit when they're not, doing what's healthy for them either or you. I think I was so busy worried about being understanding that, some of that other stuff was lost. I didn't really hear that from anybody prior to him being a cop. Does that make sense?
It does.
So if you had your choice, would you be a law enforcement wife?
That's really hard to answer. I don't think it's like that simple. I think yes. I want him to do what's going to make him happy, and if this is what that is, then absolutely yes. If this is not making him happy, then no. So it's not just like, no, I don't want to be a law enforcement spouse.
The one thing about law enforcement is the folks that make it a career. It's a calling. It's a passion.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that they've got deep within their soul. So it's definitely something that a place that they want to be. But there's a lot of marriages that struggle because the other person doesn't necessarily have that same passion or desire, or even really understand where that would come from. Life could be easier if you work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, like every other person in the world does, right? Other than those first responders that are out there working shift work. So it's truly a commitment to go down that road, and I think that it's important if they're in a position where they're not married yet, if they're looking for that partner to spend the rest of their life with, they have to make sure that it's somebody that's willing to come along and take that ride and not forced.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you said, Derek, it would have been really easy for you to hit the eject button and say, I didn't marry a cop, and this isn't the life. This isn't the life for me. And Kathy and I have had that conversation several times. There's times that I'll do that check-in with her and just say, you didn't marry a cop.
how are you doing? Are we still? And I've been in this for almost as long as I've been married. We got married, and then 6 months later is when I joined the law enforcement profession. So 36 years into law enforcement, and definitely highs and lows, both in the marriage and the law enforcement career. And sometimes they battle against each other, and sometimes it's a great ride. It's just you really have to have that communication back and forth to make sure that your partner's coming along with you. What other encouragement or tips would you give to folks when it comes to being intentional and being prepared moving forward?
For me personally, I think one of the biggest things that I would like to convey to people is one of the things that I carried a lot of guilt with was being a father and being a police officer. My oldest son has hit 3 Grand Slam home runs, and I've never been there to see one of them. And I put, while not being a good husband, I also was not necessarily the best at being a father. And one of my biggest regrets is, and now that my children are older and I can sit and have very adult conversations with them, something that my oldest son has told me and this was very recent, it just kind of opened my eyes, is he tells me all the time, Dad, you say sorry and you apologize, but I had a great life. You and Mom did everything you could for us. I know you missed some things, but it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. Like, you made up for it. And the biggest piece of encouragement I would like to give, especially officers or deputies who have children, is it's not so much about the times that you miss, because you're going to miss times, and that's just inevitable. It's going to happen. You're not going to make all the games. You're not going to make all the prom pictures. Those aren't going to be things that you're going to be able to do. But the time that you do have with them, when you're tired and you're in your own little feelings of like, no one understands, or you don't understand how tired I am. I had to work 16 hours. When your kid comes to you and hands you a mitt, just pick up the damn mitt and go throw the baseball. And if you can do that, my thought or belief is now is maybe some of that guilt that officers may carry, you'll never have to deal with it. Right? There were a lot of times I told my kids no because I was just too tired, and that was a bigger, I think, impact than missing the game or missing. You can make those adjustments through life, but when they want to hang out.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it.
And I think that there are times where, when we start feeling that guilt and we start going down that path, sometimes we withdraw even more, and it just compounds on itself. So absolutely really important to have those adult conversations with your kid, or at least have the level of conversation that you can have with your kids to do those check-ins, just like you do with your significant other or your spouse, because those are really important. And it continually goes back to that communication and being present when you're present. And I can tell you that there's a lot of times I struggle with that. In today's society, we all struggle with that. We can be sitting in the same room and not conversing because we're scrolling through our phone, which would be a great time to have those conversations. Not that scrolling through the phone isn't also a form of just kind of decompressing, and there's a time and a place for that. But when that becomes the go-to, instead of and avoiding those conversations or those times that we could be taken advantage of, we're really missing out and we're really compounding on the problem. One of the other things that you talked about I'm so glad that you shared it, because there's such a stigma around getting help. And you talked about going to and seeking out a marriage counselor. What was that experience like? And is that something that you would encourage somebody to do?
Absolutely. I would say even, early on, you don't have to wait for issues to get huge. It can be something small and simple, and going to a counselor can just kind of, prevent something small from becoming something way larger. Yeah, I 100% think it's really important for people to go.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think it's, I can remember being, and I haven't been doing cop work that long. I certainly haven't been doing it 36 years, but I can remember being a young cop on patrol, and you go to a call where it's a child's death or something. It's just kind of horrible, right? And you come in, you sit in briefing the next day, and your sergeant will stop and go, "Everybody cool from yesterday? Okay, cool." And then you have your laughs, you grab your computer, you go to your car, and you go do another 10 hours, right? And it's not that there is that kind of stigma with it, right? And I think on all levels, I think it's very beneficial to seek help. If you're not a mechanic and you have problems with your car, you go to a mechanic, because they're the experts in dealing with vehicle issues. Your brain is the same way. I really have really learned this since I got sick 2 years ago with COVID, and I was intubated for 17 days. And I think between being intubated and whether it was COVID, the medications, it wreaked havoc big time on me. And when I thought I was okay, coming out of that, I realized just how not okay I was. And the first thing I did coming out of the hospital was I started seeing a counselor. And I would encourage anybody, do it individually, do it as a couple, do it as a family. I wish I would have taken more advantage of maybe the family side of it, so that my kids could have been involved when they were a little bit younger and things were a little bit harder to understand. Now that my oldest is 22 and I get to hear him talk about, he watched his dad for the majority of his life put on a bulletproof vest, right? That plays into their psyche, and it's not, that's what you have to do for your job. But if you're communicating and you're getting the help and you're doing the things that need to be done, it can make everybody's life can still be completely normal. It doesn't have to be this big, huge, horrible, scary thing, because you get the tools to deal with the emotions. I'm very much any emotion comes out as anger, and that's not a healthy way to deal with things, right? And I don't want my kids to be like that.
Yeah. I think you bring up that, putting on a vest or putting on a gun belt, and something that we do on a daily basis, and we don't give it a second thought. It's not normal, right? I mean, in society, nobody else other than somebody in the military, nobody else does that for their job. Gets up, whatever their shift is, but they start, strapping those things to their body to go out and do their work. And we just take for granted that the kids are going to pick that up and understand why it is that we do what we do. And I find, I've got grandkids now, and it's kind of interesting, some of the conversations, kind of even some of the shock and amazement the first time they saw me in uniform. One of my grandsons constantly is now saying, "Grandpa gets the bad guys," but as he gets into the school years and is talking with other kids that are out there, that they're not going to have the same level of understanding that our kids have, or the things that they see or the things that they hear. We have to be real careful about our conversations at times, especially with little ones, around the dinner table, to make sure that we're not talking about things that they won't understand yet. To your point, there is a time, and you talking about being the protector is, as a law enforcement officer, that's our nature to begin with, and then obviously as a father and a husband, we're just kind of ultra sensitive to that with our family and want to protect them from all of the things that we see. But it is important to prepare them for life in the real world as well, so that they also understand some of the things that are really going on in the world. Any other topics or tips, resources that you think are important for, and it's nice if we can get to that officer before or as they're starting the career, but this message needs to be heard by those that are currently going through it, those that are getting towards that rock bottom, those that are thinking, I don't know if I can do both law enforcement and have a marriage. And I don't see how the two of them are going to work out. Any other resources that you guys have come across or seen that would be important?
I think, like I said before, for me, primarily just, other spouses, somebody who can understand the unique situation that you're in, and who can really understand, what you're going through. So, you're not just kind of going through it alone, because sometimes it feels, it could feel very lonely if you're at home with the kids and you don't have these other support groups. So, even just one other spouse. Some people are more comfortable with like online groups, or, there's support groups also. And then the counseling, of course.
Yeah. And I really think, I've been told from the start of my career, maintain relationships outside of law enforcement. And I haven't done a very good job of that. The majority at this point in my life, all of my close friends are people that I've met through law enforcement. Now, some of them are no longer involved in law enforcement. Some of them still are. I found it hard to keep that to bridge that gap between once I was a cop and then keeping friends that were not in law enforcement, just because it was just hard for me. You almost kind of feel like a party favor every time you go somewhere. Someone's like, "Oh man, do the finger thing to me," and "Oh, do this," and that kind of pushed me the opposite direction. I would definitely say, fill a little bit more of your time with things away from your group of guys. Motorcycle riding is a big thing for me. That's kind of my throttle therapy. I can go out and ride for 2 or 3 hours by myself, and that's kind of where I can sort my problems and my issues out. Golf, whatever your hobbies are, spend a little bit more time doing those things than just doing the barbecues and the hangouts and all the cop related things, right? So even if you can't, or you find it hard to keep friends that are no longer in law enforcement, at least keep hobbies that are nothing to do with police work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that you have friends or acquaintances outside of law enforcement when you talk about other wives? I would imagine that as couples, if you go out and spend time with folks, it's probably somebody that you have run across on the job, or a couple that you have either worked with or has been in law enforcement. Do you have friends outside of law enforcement?
The few that I had prior, I do still have. And so it's funny because, they did always preach, like, keep your friends that aren't law enforcement to him. And so I think I was so aware of that. I concentrated on it a lot to try to maintain those relationships. And that's why I kind of preach also get some law enforcement friends, because it helps as a spouse, because I didn't do that initially. But, yeah, I do have a few friends that aren't. It is a little harder to connect with them, and primarily my main friend group are spouses of law enforcement.
It was interesting when we went through, like right after the George Floyd incident, and there was such negative narrative towards law enforcement. There were some officers that I was aware of that got out of law enforcement, not because they didn't have a passion for the job and really want to do that, but it was people outside of law enforcement that started to buy into that narrative, that were their friends or family members, and really it kind of destroyed their law enforcement career. So I think that it is important that we have that healthy balance, that we do have friends that are in law enforcement, people that are experiencing, whether it's the spouse, that are experiencing the exact same things that you are. And obviously, as that law enforcement officer, folks that are going through the same struggles and experience the same things when law enforcement is the hero, and everybody thanks us for our service when we're out walking around. And then when that negative narrative hits, it's really important to have that kind of connection and that group that you can cling to as you walk through that, because it ebbs and flows. There will be a time, I'm convinced of it, that law enforcement will be the heroes again. I'm already starting to see some of that. It's a much more positive reflection around law enforcement today than it was, a year and a half ago. But there will be something that happens by one law enforcement officer or two law enforcement officers in some agency, probably far away, that will paint all of us in that broad brush, and we're going to have to walk through that again, and be able to feel confident in what it is that we do. This is still an incredibly noble profession, and I'm convinced that we still have men and women of integrity that are out there in those law enforcement roles that are trying to do the best that they can do. Every profession, there's a couple of bad apples, folks that have no business doing this job, but it's important, again, and we kind of go back to that communication piece that we're talking about, that with our partners and with our group, to make sure that we're there for each other. As we wrap this up, any other final comments, things that you think are important for either the family, the spouse of law enforcement, or from the law enforcement perspective, the deputy or the officer themselves?
I mean, for me, I think there's really just some key small things that you can do that can really help your relationship. If you're going to be late, call. Call as soon as you can, right? Your significant other does worry. So just pick up the phone and make a phone call. I'm not good at it, but I'm trying to get better, right? And the biggest thing is listen to the people that love you. When your significant other or your kids or a mom or a dad or maybe a brother or sister are telling you things, instead of taking the avenue of they don't get it, they don't understand, they do. They've been with you your whole life. Maybe just slow down and listen to what they have to say, because maybe they're seeing a change in you that isn't for the good, and you need to listen to that. And for anybody new coming into it, and even the people that are currently in it, you kind of hit on it, Mac, is that society still wants us.
Yeah.
And if you paint yourself into that corner again of it's you against the world, that's a dangerous place to be, mentally, emotionally, physically. And that's the kind of stuff that leads, I think, a lot of officers and deputies to the end of their career, right? Because they carry the wrong idea and wrong mentality. People still care about law enforcement. I can't tell the few weeks I've been back on patrol, I've had people buy me lunch. I've had people buy me coffee. I had a lady drop off a $10 gift card in my window for Starbucks. People still care. So don't buy into all the BS. But I think if you can just do those simple things and be able to check your ego, your own ego, you'll be super successful in everything, your marriage, being a parent, your career, and just being a human being, a good human being.
Yeah, I think mine is a communication, which we already covered, but just from the start to the end, getting into it, make sure the person you're with knows what they're getting into as much as you can. I don't think anyone really is going to comprehend it in the beginning. And then just communicating throughout. You're not always going to get it right. And so just being honest about what you need, where you're at, what's going on. Yeah, the check-ins that you say you do with Kathy, I think that's perfect. Just every once in a while checking in with each other and communicating, overly communicating even.
Yeah, and I think that overly communicating is such an interesting piece because we may think that we're communicating, but probably we're not doing it to the level that it really needs to be done. I would echo all of those all of those tips. I just want to thank you guys for coming on and being with us. It's so important to look at all aspects of the law enforcement officer that's the first responder that's going out and facing all that they face, whether it's on the jail floor, whether it's on patrol. It's important that they are as whole as they can be, and I mean that from the perspective of the check. If you go back to the car analogy, are we doing the preventive maintenance on the car? Are we making sure that everything on the car is working the way that it needs to be working? And this is such a huge piece. It's so easy in law enforcement to put the job and the community first in our profession. And I know that I've been guilty of that many times throughout my career, especially when you change job titles or job roles. I know that you're a supervisor, and that's, now there's other players that are involved in that. It's not just you that you have to worry about. You have to worry about your team that is around you, who is also going through all of the same things that we just talked about. So instead of one that we're kind of concerned about, now there's 8 or 9 of them that we're concerned about and have conversations about. So it's incredibly important that we're taking care of ourselves, and that there will be times where we spend more of we'll put more of a priority or an emphasis on our job, and that's okay as long as we go back as soon as we can and make sure that the family is put back where they need to be, that they truly are the priority. So thank you for being with us. It's an incredibly important topic, and thanks for being open and candid about that. I think that we need more of that, because truly those are the things that help law enforcement officers succeed. I love when we have supervisors that are not afraid to talk about the real topics. And you brought up the baby death and the sergeant coming in the next morning saying, everybody okay? Okay, let's get back to work. Knowing that that's not okay. But it kind of goes back to that phrase that it's okay to not be okay. And then let's get some resources around that to make sure that we're taking care of each other, and we're taking care of ourselves. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we have no hope of taking care of our families or the community that we're out there serving. So I really appreciate your time and your candidness in all of this. And I appreciate what you're doing. I know that it's not always easy in your role, and it's certainly not easy sometimes to come and talk about those things, especially if you don't like public speaking. If you're going out of your comfort zone again to sit with us, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
That's all for this week's episode of the Elevate Your Call to Service podcast. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. We invite you to visit our website at leleaders.com for our free guide, 10 questions to consider before putting in for your next promotion. Until next time, stay safe and remember, you have the power to make a difference. Thank you for your commitment to law enforcement. We're honored to be a part of your journey to success. Let's elevate our call to service together.